Welcome on in to Falcons Today. Matthew Peterson here talking about 5 players I think Atlanta should avoid with their 8th overall pick. I know this is kind of a doom and gloom segment, but ultimately the draft is always filled with great picks and awful picks. I don't want to see the Falcons make a bad pick. And when you pick in the top 10 as a team, you don't hope to pick in the top 10 the next year. That's not an awesome achievement to have, the 8th overall pick, especially year after year. And I don't want to see them get stuck with the 8th overall pick next year, and picking a very good player this year might help them get them out of that rut. So I'm going to go in order of players from most to least most, if that's even proper English, I don't want to see Atlanta use the 8th overall pick on. Starting with the Penn State edge rusher, Chop Robinson. This name might sound a little familiar for those of you that have been subscribed to the channel for a few months, because we actually talked about Chop Robinson back in November. And I'll expand more on that in just a second. But let's look and see what he did last year for the Nittany Lions. 15 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. Now, he did miss some time towards the end of the season, so take that into account. But for me, he's on this list because there is just not enough production for the 8th overall pick. Now, the first mock draft I saw back in November from Dane Brugler at The Athletic had Atlanta taking Chop Robinson. And if you guys remember, I actually did a deep dive on taking edge rushers that are in the first round because of their God-given, incredible physical traits and not because of their production. Because Chop Robinson is a physical beast when it comes to the size, the speed, and the bend that you hardly find all 3 of in an edge rusher. But at some point, you do have to sack the quarterback, right? You don't get sacks for being very fast and breathing on the quarterback. So what I did, if you guys remember back in November, was I looked at the NFL draft results from 2017 to 2020. Went back that far because that's a good enough date range to know whether or not those picks were good or bad picks. And in that span, 19 edge rushers were selected in the first round. Of those 19, 11 either had their 5th-year option picked up or made a Pro Bowl. And I would say that would count as a successful pick if the team opts to get the 5th-year option picked up or if they made a Pro Bowl. So 11 of the 19 were successful picks. Of those 11 that were successful, none of them had less than 5.5 sacks in a single season in college. None of them had less than 11.5 sacks in their collegiate career. Chop Robinson, unfortunately, falls into the bucket of less than 5.5 sacks in a single season and less than 11.5 sacks in his career in college. So that's why I've got Chop Robinson on here. I understand there are some guys who are physically gifted, and I think Chop Robinson's stock is going to rise after the combine, a little bit like Trayvon Walker from Georgia, because he was not someone that was uberly productive for the Bulldogs, but they saw the traits and they thought we can't pass on this. And Trayvon Walker's not really doing all that much great stuff in Jacksonville, at least not worthy of the 1st overall pick. And I would apply the same to Chop Robinson with pick number 8. Moving on to our second avoid at number 8, it is the Michigan man, J.J. McCarthy. Probably the most talked about draft prospect over the last month, I would say. And here's what I want to open up with. Are we just going to forget about the season? Are we just going to act like the games mattered for nothing? Because what I saw last year was J.J. McCarthy do a really, really good job of leading a run-first offense and didn't make a lot of downfield passes. And I don't think that means he can't be a good NFL quarterback. I don't think that means he can't be drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round. Maybe the late 1st round. But we're going to move him all the way up to the 8th overall pick now? Are we not going to just we're just going to black out everything that happened in the fall? Did anyone in October think, like, this is the guy I want to see use a top 10 pick on? I didn't. But this is what we do as a country, as a NFL fan base nationwide. We have the draft in April, which means we get bored waiting for the draft. So we conjure up these stories and conjure up these ideas of this guy going super early or this guy falling. And then the draft rolls around and the GMs just laugh at all of us because We became victims to boredom and just created these wild ideas of this guy's going to go top 10. Who remembers last year when people said Will Levis is going to go first overall? Huh? I don't think J.J. McCarthy should go 8th overall to the Falcons. If you want to use a second rounder on him, fine. Right? I am all for throwing darts at the quarterback bullseye and hoping that you hit. And second rounder, if it doesn't work out, that'd be a bummer. Second rounders are valuable. I'm not going to act like they're useless. But ultimately, that should not make or break the franchise for the next 2 to 3 years. Missing on a top 10 pick, that could set you back a little bit. And missing on this one would set you back if it does happen. So pick a quarterback, though, from the second tier of QBs. Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and J.J. McCarthy. You would have been laughed at in October if you said, give me J.J. McCarthy over Michael Penix. What's changed? Come on. Don't become a victim of just being bored and think, well, let's just kind of create a new idea up. I'm sticking with Michael Penix Jr. Moving on to our third player to avoid the 8th overall pick, I'm going to go with Florida State edge rusher Jared Verse. Now, I like Jared Verse as a player. Don't get me wrong. I'm not coming for him as much as I was for Chop Robinson and J.J. McCarthy. He is 6'4", 260 pounds, started off at Albany, then he transferred down to Tallahassee, put together back-to-back 9-sack seasons, could have entered the draft last year, went back for another year. I think it helped his draft stock out. And the Falcons do have a need at edge rusher. There's no denying it, right? They have Bud Dupree set to hit free agency. Not so confident Lorenzo Carter will be returning in 2024. So there's a need here. But I don't think Jared Verse is an ideal fit in a 3-4 defense. I don't think he's going to make for a good down lineman for a 3-4 defense. And I don't think he's good enough in coverage as an outside linebacker to pick up and fulfill those responsibilities. So I just don't think it's a great fit for him in Atlanta. Now, before we get to the rest of my avoid at pick number 8 targets, I do want to tell you guys about our sponsor, which is Prize Picks. And I know a certain viewer of the channel is going to love this read. So get started with Prize Picks today because it is daily fantasy made easy. All you do is pick 2 to 6 players. Simple enough. Choose more or less on their projected stats. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about and you want it in layman's terms, I can help you out, Michael Scott. Here's what you do. All you're going to do is select 2 to 6 players, and I've got a whole bunch of selections here for the upcoming MLB season, and I just took the more on all of them. Why? Because this is the summer of dingers, baby. So if you want to watch Austin Riley or Ronald Acuna home runs and have a little extra sweet incentive to cheer them on, well, ride with me over at Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. So turn what your entry is into 15x if you go a perfect 6 for 6 on Prize Picks. Once again, download the Prize Picks app by going to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS. Our fourth avoid at pick number 8. And again, this is not all these guys I share the same amount of equal dislike for the 8th overall pick. We are slowly regressing here. But I'm going to go with Brian Thomas, the wide receiver out of LSU. Why would I have Brian Thomas here? The guy had 17 touchdowns last year for Jane Daniels in Baton Rouge. 1,100 yards, 68 grabs, and that's an average of 17.3 receptions. So, Petey, with all due respect, what the fuck is he doing on your list? Well, 6'4", 205 pounds. He's got really great top-end speed. But despite being 6'4", he doesn't actually play with a 6'4" frame. Like, he's not the best at physical contested catches, actually. And he lacks an extensive route tree. Like, Brian Thomas was, I think, he had like a doctorate in backyard football with Jaden Daniels of, I'm just going to go run a fade route, chuck it up to me. I'm 6'4", and I can take down this Mississippi State DB. That's not going to carry over to the NFL if you only have one route, and defensive coordinators have some tape and some film to prepare their defensive backs for every single week. So Brian Thomas, I think, can make a good NFL receiver, but I'm not super high on him. I've got my concerns about the size not really fitting what you think would be the best characteristics for a 6'4" receiver, and I haven't seen him run more than 1 or 2 routes during his time at LSU very well. So for that reason, I don't want him to be the 8th overall pick for Atlanta. I think a team picking 20 to 25, it's a pretty good gamble for a guy that had 17 touchdowns. But I liked Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze a lot more with the 8th overall pick. These are 2 wide receivers I would like to see Atlanta target if they still need to address wide receiver by the time the draft rolls around. Now, we have one more name to look at here, but really quickly, selfishly, I do ask to subscribe to the channel if you have not already. We are closing in on 20,000 subscribers. It is crazy to see the kind of growth we have had over the last few months. So if you have not joined the channel yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go ahead and do so today. 5th player to avoid at pick number 8. I'm going to go with the Mizzou cornerback, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. So there are some good corners in this class, and I think Rakestraw is one of those good corners. But I don't think he is worthy of being the 8th overall pick for Atlanta. 35 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups. The interceptions don't bother me too much. I wouldn't read into them too much when it comes to college to the pros. I mean, picks in general are just so fluky. Sometimes you get to bounce your way, sometimes you don't. I don't think you should make a mountain out of a guy getting 0 or getting 4 interceptions in a season. Now, Rakestraw is 6 foot tall, 188 pounds, so pretty good size for a corner. He's got good length. He's able to kind of bear hug receivers, if you will. However, the reason why I've got him on this list, the primary reason at least, is he suffered a lot of injuries throughout his years and time at Mizzou. He ended this past season injured. I'm sure during the combine, teams will get a much better idea of just truly how healthy he is. But we're not talking about the 24th overall pick. Got to hit with top 10 picks. Just can't miss. And I feel like taking a guy that missed a good amount of time during his time in college with the 8th overall pick is just asking for trouble. Maybe the risk will pay off, but I don't want to risk it with the 8th overall pick. There are other corners I like a lot more that I think should go before Rakestraw at pick number 8. Cooper DeJean from Iowa, talk about a playmaker. There were 2 Hawkeyes that were first-round picks in last year's draft, and DeJean was better than both of those players. He had 3 pick sixes in 2022. Now, Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, he is fast, he is lengthy, he's not the best tackler necessarily, but it's hard to coach speed. And he has the ability to recover after getting beat off the snap. And then maybe the most pure shutdown corner, Terrion Arnold. Great ball skills, 6 interceptions during his 2 years as a starter for Nick Saban's Crimson Tide. Terrion Arnold, definitely my favorite of the bunch right there. Now, who do you want to avoid at pick number 8? Who is the guy that maybe other people are talking about drafting, and you're the one in the friend group, in the group chat, in the basement going, I don't want to pick him? Let me know down below in the comment section. This is a safe space, so let your hatred out for some of these players, and I'm sure all of this is going to become horrible rat poison, and Brian Thomas Jr. will be picked by the Carolina Panthers in the 33rd overall selection, and he'll have 3 touchdowns against Atlanta in week 1 next year. No doubt about it. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Always appreciate people who tune in and watch all the way to the end of the video. So if you're still watching, give me an ATL in the comment section.